there's a topic I wanted to go over that I've kind of like went over on Twitter. And I just have a lot to say on this, so I just felt like it was a good idea to start making like a stream. And I haven't been on a stream in such a long time that this is just going to be pretty interesting. So just to start, I want to screen share something. But before I do that, I'm trying to figure out how the hell to figure out Twitch. Because like I said, this is my first time doing this. Let me try to figure this out. So I'm going to go on my channel, and I'm going to see what's going on currently. It says right now that I'm live, and I want to see if I can like take this and like put it on my Twitter just to let people know that I'm live, if that's even possible. Which is pretty interesting because I have no clue how to do that. I should have done my research. There we go, share on Twitter. Because I'm used to using StreamYard, and then I just go on YouTube and then I like just do my thing, but this is totally different, and I want to try something different. And there we go. So I doubt anyone's gonna really watch at the moment because this Twitch is fairly new, and but anyway, I just wanted to dive into this. So that's out of the way. I posted it on Twitter. There's gonna be a few people that know I'm live, but I would like to post this on YouTube when it's possible. So, one thing I do know how to do is to switch to display picture. So, that's what I'm going to do. So, this is the thing that I was interested in. It was posted by someone named Alexander Leon, or Leon, I don't know how to say his name. Writer and campaigner, LGBTQ plus rights, anti-racism, mental health. So, he wrote the following. Sexual racism is racism. If you're white and you find yourself writing off an entire ethnic group from your dating or sex life because you can't imagine finding them attractive, recognize that this is a learned behavior which originates in white supremacy. Here's some more info. And I'm going to go over these in a sec. Now the second part, I'm going to go over too. Because there's a thread over all of this. Let me click here. Let's talk about sexual racism. And this was made by Alexander. And it says, a guide for white people. Now, I'll be honest here. I can see why people are pretty frustrated with this because, first of all, like I'll be getting into a bit later, I don't think this is just something that white people need to understand. This isn't just a target towards white people. It's everyone. Everyone has some kind of preference. Everyone has some kind of bias, and I would get into that later. But I just find it just weird that he would put a guide for white people. And to go back to what he said previously here, is this learned behavior originates in white supremacy. Now, this is something I've talked about a lot before, is white supremacy. We all know what that is. We know that there's forms of it like white nationalism, alt-right, alt-light, boogaloo boys. There's so many like forms of this. And there's degrees of it too. And there are people of color in a white nationalist movement. It's not just white people. So that's why I feel like, again, white people are not the only ones that are racist. There's people of color that are racist too. So that's one thing that I saw it and I was like, I need to call that particular part out. So what is sexual racism? An individual's inclination towards having sex with or dating someone based on that person's perceived racial identity. It's commonly used to describe the tendency for white people, again, to exclude certain ethnic groups from their sexual and romantic life based on their preferences. Now, again, white people are not the only ones that do this. And I can even give examples of what I've went through that wasn't just white people. This is something that a lot of other people do. There's black men that that refuse to date black women. There's Asian men that refuse to date white women. It goes on. And as you're about to find out, yes, in a multicultural society, this does count as a form of racism. Now, here's the "it's just a preference" part. Jam or marmalade is a preference. Deciding that you're not into an entire ethnic group is not. Now, I actually, in a way, slightly agree with this, in fact, because preferences, it could be like skin preferences, for example. It could be, I like people with smaller noses. I like tall people. I like people with blonde hair. These are preferences. But I think it's I find it ridiculous to like decide that you're not going to date an entire ethnic group based off like perceived beliefs that you have of them, which could be like stereotypical, or it could be like what you have seen 5 people from that ethnic group look like. Therefore, that's not your preference. Everyone's different. So this is something that I have a problem with as well, is that there's people out there that are like, I am never going to date a white person, or I'm never going to date a black person. And I'm curious, what is their basis on this? Like, what is going on in their head that makes them feel like they cannot date this person, this entire ethnic group? Is it because of these stereotypical things that we hear often? Like, oh, I wouldn't date black women, which I'm going to get into as well. There's a lot of people that refuse to date black women because they perceive them as loud and obnoxious. And it's not so much based on like the what they look like. So I know I'm rambling here, my goodness. It's so hot here today, like I'm going crazy. So unlike preferences around gender, racial preferences in dating are usually considered a result of societal conditioning rather than innate or biological. This means that your attraction or lack thereof to a particular race is not an innate preference, but a learned preference, cultivated over a lifetime due to the way you were socialized, and you can unlearn it. Now it goes on to say the way I was socialized. You likely grew up in a world where white people were celebrated as the default and only type of attractiveness. White supremacy extends out to the media, fashion, and popular culture. You literally can't escape it. Now, there is truth to that, where a lot of people of ethnic backgrounds are misrepresented in media, or not represented as much in media. And that gives people an assumption of what these ethnic groups are like. So imagine how many times the idea that white equals attractive was implicitly reinforced to you growing up. The models you saw in advertisements, the leading actors in Hollywood films. This gets compounded if you grew up in a predominantly white area. Now, I kind of want to talk about this a bit as well. There are people, even people of color, as I say, like me, that had problems feeling okay with myself. Now, I'm going to go back to this. There we go. Now, like me, I've had issues with this before as well. I felt... Oh, by the way, I just want to say hi to everyone in the chat. This is something I had issues with as well. I didn't feel comfortable with who I was. I felt like I wasn't attracted enough. And I still don't think so. And there's a lot of people that will agree with me, and there's people that won't. And that's when we can get into preferences later. But it is conditioned to us. Like, did I hear growing up that Indigenous women were beautiful? No. Even to this day, there's politicians, at least I think 2 politicians in Canada, that said Indigenous women are ugly. That's what they said. We don't see enough Indigenous women on television. When we do see Indigenous people, they're heavily stereotyped. And sadly, due to a lot of historical issues, like genocide, for example, there's a lot of problems we face in society to this day. And then when people look at us, they see the stereotypes that they were told about, like, oh, you're just alcoholics. So they'll see anyone who's indigenous with that is drinking, they immediately go to that thought. Now, something I mentioned in my Twitter that a lot of people seem to not understand or comprehend, a few people did, but if it's really based off preferences with like how people look, their eyes, their eyebrows, their complexion, their nose, etc., even down to their hair, why is it that someone like me and most indigenous people they have very big similarities to like Asian people and Hispanic people, and Hispanic people and Asian people are fetishized a lot, and we're not looked at the same way. You know, people are calling us ugly instead of beautiful. So I wonder if everything is really based off preferences, or if there's more to it. And I have some. I'm trying to find that article as well that I posted earlier today, that explains that. In fact, Black women and Asian men are the ones that have difficulty trying to find someone in the dating world. So, little story here as well. I happened to talk to someone who happened to be black, half white, a couple of years ago. And he told me that he just flat out refused to date black women. Just flat out. And I just asked him why. I was like, why do you not want to date black women? And you know what his response is, which most people tend to say when they don't want to date black women, is that they are loud, obnoxious people, they yell, they are entitled. There's so many things that come out that way. And I was just like, pretty shocked, to be honest. Like, I knew there was people that thought that way, but it was just kind of hard listening to someone say that, especially someone who happened to be black himself. And it was so frustrating. I was just like, oh my god, you're actually basing this thing you've heard, maybe 5 people in your life happen to act that way, and that made you refuse to date all black women. And people see black people as more masculine and dominant, and Asian people as more feminine and submissive. Yes, that's something I actually wanted to get into as well. Here's the thing. If you happen to look at me and not know that I'm indigenous, I have been called so many things. Like, people mainly think that I happen to be Hispanic. There's people that think I'm like half Japanese, half white. There's people that think I'm half black, half white. There's so many things. And when I was dating, there was at least a few times where I heard, and this is so frustrating just to like repeat it. I wanted to date an Asian woman, but you pass. And it's like, gee, thanks, I guess. It's like, I happened to pass enough for you to be like, okay, I would have preferred having an Asian woman, but this is okay, I guess. And that's where I wonder if it's just preferences, because if I happen to pass as an Asian woman, why would he need to say that? Why would they actually need to say that? If I pass, then it's purely based off the preferences that they have when it comes to complexion, when it comes to facial features, hair, for example. But it didn't come across that way. Because why is it that if it's just that preference, why would it matter if I'm not Asian? So that's when I actually had a conversation with one person that I was seeing that happened to say that he liked how feminine Asian women happen to be, how submissive they happen to be. So this is clearly a stereotype that everyone has heard before. I have to take a water break. Which, by the way, if you can see, it's Spyro. Okay. So, this is something I've heard many times before. I've looked into this, and quite frankly, I understand where people are coming from when they talk about preferences, but I can see where, and I'm going to go back to you can see here. Oh my god, where is it? Okay, here we go. I can see where Alexander is coming from when he's talking about this. I wish he wouldn't base it solely on white people, because that's entirely not true. It's not just white people that think this way. It's really not. So he writes, before you ask, no, it's not comparable to other sexual preferences which are either gender or don't uphold a system of structural oppression like height. It's not racism if people of color exclude white people from their sex lives. This is often done to protect from racism. And that's another thing I just don't. Again, there's slight agreement there. I think that's still wrong, because I have dated white men in the past that, yes, there was men that spoke like that to me. But let's just say, for example, my past relationship, he was a nice guy. He did not treat me this way. So if I excluded white people, and this is true, if I excluded white people from my sex life, from my relationships, I'm doing a disservice to myself as well, because I am stopping myself from potentially finding someone that respects me for who I truly am. So I can see why some people are being a bit nervous to date certain people when it comes to this, but I just think it's wrong. So, types of sexual racism. Sexual stereotyping. Making sexual assumptions about someone based on stereotypes associated with their ethnic background, which I just spoke about before. And again, this is a common one. It says right here, Asian women being submissive, black men being dominant. And there's another one with black men as well, where there's this fear of black men leaving them in the relationship, or leaving them with the kid. That's another thing that people would bring up as to why they would refuse to date black men. And a word that I have trouble using, because I don't know if people are aware, I have a speech impediment that I've had since I was a child, and I'm still trying to work on it. So, fetishization. Not sure if I said it right. Reducing someone down to racialized aspects of their appearance that you find attractive in order to fulfill a sexual fantasy. Which is something one of, I just at the top of my head I think of. Let me go back to here. One guy I happened to be with mentioned that he would prefer to be with an Asian woman with and again, this is my first time on Twitch, I hope I don't get in trouble for this, for a certain type of body type, let's say. I don't know if I can, again, I'm new on Twitch, I don't know what's appropriate or not. So this is a real thing. I talked about the stereotyping, but there is a fetishization as well. I actually went on a dating site, and I didn't have my picture up, but I still got someone writing to me because he saw that I had Native American in my profile. Now, like I said prior to this, there is a lot of people that think we're ugly. This is a major thing. People, when they think of Indigenous women, they're like, oh my god. But there are people that fetishize us. And he assumed, and this is just really hilarious to me, actually, is he assumed I was going to look like Pocahontas. He even told me that. He was like, oh my goodness, I would love to see if she has long black hair, a nice tan, and clearly not all of us look like this. We really don't. We all look different, and I obviously didn't match his expectations. And when I finally did post a picture of myself, pale, dark hair and all, that's not straight, long, and beautiful, he stopped talking immediately. He stopped talking to me immediately. And I found that super funny, actually. And this is a thing. When it comes to fetishizing people, there's that... there's this idea of what you expect from a person. If you're fetishizing Asian women, for example, as being... Whoops, I just kicked my Sorry. I just kicked my camera. If you're doing so, you're assuming they're going to be something based on a stereotype that you have and that you like. So you're like, oh, they're going to be submissive. I'm hoping that they're going to be this way. They're going to be feminine. And I'm expecting them to be this way. Well, turns out they may not be that way. So I'm going to go back to the thread. And I kind of want to go into this just a little bit more as well. By the way, it's really hot here. And I don't have AC. So I'm not going to look at this, but Alexander posted a video entitled Sexual Racism in the LGBT Community. And he wrote, before you get mad in the comments, I even have a YouTube video which explains this in more detail. I've given you all the info, I've made it easy. Will you take the time to be actively anti-racist today? Now, I can read a bit of this, but a mutual of mine actually posted this and just flat out disagreed with it. The mutual just believed there to be really preferences, and she actually posted, she wrote to me saying that, well, she's pale, and not many people like pale, and that's their prerogative, which is true. But then I want to get into something and wonder, is it simply just preference at times, or is it truly based on societal beauty standards? Like, for example, in Western civilization, at least at the moment, it's a huge thing to be tanned. So a lot of people would look at pale in a different light. In let's say, Asia, where if you see it's trending, if it's still trending, let me just look around and see. Yep. Indian whitening cream renamed as Glow and Lovely following BLM protest. So I'm going to just share this as well. Sorry about that. I don't know how to get the clicks differently on OBS, so I'm just bear with me. So I have seen this, and this is a huge difference between how we operate here. Having pale skin, having whitening type of skin color is a beauty standard in Asia. Sadly. I don't like beauty standards. I despise them. I've talked a lot about them on my Twitter account. People think I'm jealous of other people. People think I'm being rude or something. I don't care. Because I think everyone's beautiful in their own way. And I think when we put beauty standards on people, this is the stuff we come out with. I'm just being careful here. This is a problem. This is a problem in Asia. And in let's say Canada and America, being tanned is beautiful. We look at the likes of Kim Kardashian, Snooki, well, if everyone remembers her, and people like Ariana Grande. I like how, okay, Classy Liberal says, I hear you say oh my god, fetishization differently than I do, but I think it's accent differences. It's possible. It's just, it's a difficult word for me to say. And that's the thing. Exactly. Whitening cream is very common in Asian countries, and tanning is very common here. So if someone lives in places like Canada, for example, it's possible. There's still people here that might think my skin tone is lovely, but there is a thing for tanning. And another thing we have, which is something that changes every decade, and that's why I can't stand beauty standards. When I was growing up in the 90s, it was a huge thing to be thin and tall. This caused a lot of women, including me, to have eating disorders where we felt like we needed to look like that to be considered beautiful. And right now, it's a total shift. We're seeing women like Nicki Minaj, who happens to have accented boobs, an accented butt, and this is considered beautiful. This is considered attractive and sexy. And And I like that. One thing I do like about my time period is that I do see that we're starting to change. I see that people are less afraid to come out, and there's people that are attracted to women that are more heavier, women that are thinner, women that are tall, short, and it doesn't matter. But there is still a societal beauty standard, really definitely pushed by places like Hollywood, and even pushed on like Instagram, and pushed on social media in general, pushed on YouTube. And I don't know if it's going to change. Like, who knows? Like, maybe in a few years, we're going to start to think being skinny is attractive again. Like, this is something, let's say in the 50s, being a thin woman with accented features like hips was attractive. Look at Marilyn Monroe. And then people like Twiggy, who was this like really thin model during the 60s. That was a huge thing. It was a huge thing to be thin in the 60s. And then the 70s, it was like that thin, but like I have muscles in my arms type of look. And then the 80s, it was like the hips again. And then it was like always a change every decade. So when we talk about preferences, a lot of preferences are, it's not just preferences to me. It's so many other factors. There's so many environmental factors involved. Beauty standards can be hurtful to women, as I know many tend to compare themselves with women in magazines, where they are very photoshopped or on extremely strict diets. And exercise can only be done by people you have time and resources. That's really interesting. I think we need to understand that, and this is something that a lot of people don't comprehend. All bodies are beautiful, and that's how I view it. And we're all different. We all can't have the same type of body. And when we push this idea that this is what you should look like, this affects us greatly. And look at, like I said, how many people were anorexic during the 90s because of this. And look how many people are wasting tons and tons of money trying to look like Kim Kardashian and Nicki Minaj. Now, I'm going to go back to talking about a bit more about this particular thread by Alexander. Because it actually garnered quite a bit of hate. There's a few people that agreed to it. There's a few people that didn't. There's so many different things. So there's like I said before, I don't agree with the whole "it's just white people" thing. That is really damaging to the topic at hand. It really is, because if we really just like base it solely on like white people, we're diminishing the reality that this is something that everyone faces, everyone thinks of, because we all have our biases. Like even me, like I'll speak of like my preferences. Actually, in fact, I happen to go for white men. It's true. I happen to go for them. And I had to really look deep inside myself and to realize, why is that the case? Why is it that I tend to favor white men instead of like indigenous men, black men, etc.? Which, just to be clear, I have crushes and I continue to have crushes on guys of all different ethnicities. But I tend to date white men. So, let me dive into that a bit more. And first of all, if anyone has preferences that they want to talk about in the chat, you're more than welcome to, because I am really curious about what other people have to say. Why is it that I happen to like white guys? Well, first of all, they're the only ones that showed interest, like major interest in me. Like, I think there was only one, at least that I'm aware of, one black guy in my entire life that found me attractive and wanted to date me. And the reason I didn't date him is because that's the one I told you about before that said he refused to date black women. So this is, again, they have probably a preference of that doesn't look like me, which is fine. But this is the reality. This is it. Black men don't usually find me attractive. White men do. White men noticed me more often. Second place, Indigenous men, because I'm Indigenous myself and I'm in the community. So, those are the types that I usually go for. And it goes, just to like be clear as well, it's not just looks for me. And for a lot of people, that's the truth. Like, first of all, obviously that's something that you're going to look into. You're going to look at someone and be like, wow, they're beautiful. Let me get to know them more. And if they have like traits that you admire as well, the personality traits that you like, little quirks they do, then that makes you like them more. But that's exactly what I'm going to talk about when it comes to white men. The white men I've dated, I've had things in common with them. And that's just happens to be it. I happen to have a lot in common in them. What I look for in men is, first of all, I want them to have good taste in music. So I know that's a bit silly to think of, but music is a big chunk of my life. So if a guy happens to like not really enjoy the likes of Jimi Hendrix, Jefferson Airplane, and Oasis and Blur, then I'm gonna have an issue. It sounds silly. Who knows? Maybe I'll even date someone that happens to not like that. And there's always cases where you just really don't know what's going to happen in the future. That's another reason why I can't stand it when people say they flat out refuse to date a certain ethnicity. Because you have no idea who you're going to fall in love with later. You have no idea. Maybe the person I marry might be a black man. Because one black man finally will like me. It's like, I don't know. It's possible. So this is the reality. And that's one thing I take really into account is the music, liking the same type of activities. So it just so happens that the people I happen to meet that enjoy the same type of activities that I like and I happen to find attractive are white men. And that's how it is. The Indigenous men that I happen to like, of course they're out there, but in my particular lifespan, I have not met one that likes the same music as me, that likes the same type of activities. So in cases like that, it was purely based off like their attractiveness rather than them as a person or what we can do with each other. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So there's a big difference between preferences. Like even preferences for me, I happen to, and people pointed this out, I happen to like men that have a certain type of facial structure. And that's, again, that facial structure is not just purely based off of white men. It's based off so many other men. It's that long face with the big nose, Liam Gallagher style. That's what I like. So, sorry, it is boiling. I don't know if you see my sweat, but my goodness. Let me read a bit more of the comments while I like cool off here. Yeah, of course when people say you have to be attracted to, like, I don't see beauty or anything. I just like the person for their personality. It's like, first of all, there still has to be some sort of attractiveness there. Some kind of level. And who knows, maybe there's people based off, and this is true, there's people that don't really look at facial features as an attractive appeal. It's like, what do they call them when they're attracted to a person's mind? And this is a thing. Everyone's different. That's one thing we have to keep in mind. Every single person is different. So that was the problem I had with that particular message, is that they were like just putting it basically on white people and saying that's their problem, when it's reality, it's everyone's issue. And everyone needs to, in my opinion, and this is something that I know a lot of people might disagree with, and that's fine, I think we need to really reflect on our preferences and try to figure out why we have these preferences. And that's what I did with mine, because I wanted to know, am I being biased? Am I being really like, am I being too much here? Is it wrong that I happen to keep liking white guys? I really wanted to dive deeper into this. And it felt good doing so, because I realized what I truly admire about people and what I want in people. And that led me into, like, obviously, I'm not going to be one of those people that say, I refuse to date X, Y, and Z. it's not really silly. Music is a part of who you are, and that is true. And it's the same with everything. Like, it could be so many different things. Music taste is important. I hate my crushes usually don't like my music taste. Hard to initiate. And that's how you kind of get into conversations with people, is that you might find someone attractive, but if you really can't, like, see eye to eye on something, then there's going to be a problem. And that's when I found it interesting when that video of Caitlyn Bennett going around going like, well, why won't you date this black guy? You're racist. It's like, I don't know if anyone saw that video, but I highly recommend you don't. It's just a waste of time, and Caitlyn Bennett is just a waste of time. But it's because he's a Trump supporter. It's not, and again, a lot of people might say, oh, there's nothing wrong with being a Trump supporter. I personally think there is. Therefore, I can't imagine dating a Trump supporter because their views don't align with mine. So there are cases in which, like, people of different religions can date each other, can marry even, and have, like, good lives together. But there's other cases where it can't, and that's perfectly fine. I'm an atheist. I will have a really hard time dating someone that's religious, especially someone who's, like, insanely religious, like, that prays every night. I can't imagine being in that type of structure, because, like, when I think in the future about having kids with them, is this going to be an issue? And that's a huge thing, and it comes with conservatives, it comes with Republicans, Democrats. Everyone has a different way of thinking, and I can't date someone who doesn't have some form of activism in them as well, that just doesn't care about politics. And sadly, I have dated someone in the past that just simply didn't care about politics. He didn't comprehend it. He didn't really want to get into it. His father wasn't, like, insanely conservative, and it was just really hard just, like, sitting there listening to him, like, watch Fox News and, like, trash AOC, and it was just like, oh, it was so painful. But I guess that's why it didn't last. But for example, in my previous relationship, there was connections there. There was we were both atheists. We were both highly into politics, and we both aligned very similarly in our political spheres. But we disagreed on certain aspects, and that was good because it initiated conversation as well. If we all agreed with the same exact thing, it was going to be hard to initiate conversations. And when it comes to people who like the same music, I don't want everyone to like the same exact music as I do. That's boring. And that's how you make conversations grow. It's like, hey, we might like Oasis together. We might like Jefferson Airplane together. But who knows? Maybe he might not know who the Animals are, or he might not know who, trying to, like, think of people. Amy Winehouse. He might not have heard her music, and then that's how we can get involved with things. So that's where, like, a lot of people tend to, like, not comprehend. I know I kind of got a little bit more deeper, like, other than just attractive preferences. It's more like preferences on their personality as well that we need to take into account. And like I said, if I happen to date mainly white men, it's because the white men that I happen to have met in my life had more in common with me. And that's fine. So I'm going to take a short water break again, because my goodness, I'm talking a lot. Okay, so here's a question for everyone. I know I have a pretty much more left-leaning audience, but I am curious, would you be okay dating a Trump supporter? And even if they're not a Trump supporter, let's say dating a Republican, dating a conservative, dating center-right. I am just super curious about that. And by the way, if you see my background, I have an obsession with dolls. So if I date someone, he can't be afraid of these, because it's going to be a problem. It's just, reminds me of that Seinfeld episode where, like, his like fiance had like a row of dolls, and it freaked him out. And this is me. I like having my dolls. Whew, my goodness. I think it's like 29 degrees Celsius right now. I know everyone like noticed it. Even on my Twitch, like, I think like my banner is like my dolls. Let me see. We should sterilize them. Oh my god. I would date conservative libertarian if they at least are very critical of Trump. I live in a very conservative area and my family is very conservative. Yeah, that's blind Trumpists. I would just call them cult followers. Because the whole Trump thing, it's actually pretty scary. How many people just blindly follow Trump, and I can't even do the same thing with people I follow. I'm always critical of things. Sorry if the my camera just was going like that's another thing I think people need to keep in mind, is that it's okay to be critical. It's okay to be critical of people that you even adore, that you like. It's natural. And I know I'm like kind of like switching the topic a bit here, but I mostly said what I just to be clear, I mostly said what I wanted to say about the whole preferences thing. I think it's just to be absolutely clear, preferences are a real thing, but unfortunately with the way society is, the fact that there's so many stereotypes out there, there's so many beauty standards out there, that a lot of this can get into mix, and it can like actually the environment itself really does have a say in the way we think, the way we act. So just calling them just preferences to me is pretty insulting, especially with like my background of like what I went through. It's like gee, thanks. It's not just it's just preferences that he wanted someone that looked like Pocahontas, or that I wasn't Asian enough, or it's like things like that. It's ridiculous.